And we're back with another quick tutorial, and this time on the priority system. And I know what you're thinking. The priority system is so exciting. It's one of those amazing systems where you get to control absolutely every single detail of your pawns. And of course, if you do it incorrectly, you'll have no idea why they're doing random things that they sometimes end up doing. So if you've ever had your pawns not doing work you wanted them to do, yeah, you should probably check out the priority system. First up, just how it works in BASIC is everything on the left-hand side will be done first. If everything was equal and all of them had the same numbers, they'll do everything on the left first, and then as you go right, they are less likely to do, well, they won't do those things until everything preceding it has been done. So if everything here was set to level 1, they would do firefighting first, then patient, then doctor, then bed rest, then basic, then warden, etc., 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 all the way until the end. But you can use the number system to juke that. So for example, here we have Digtastic over here has level 1s all the way across here, but then at the very end, you see there's level 2. That means they will do all of these things first. If all of those things are done, then they will do research. Then after that, they will do construct, grow, mine, plant, smith, tailor, craft. They will skip hauling, go straight to cleaning because that's a higher number. And then very finally, they'll do haul. They will never do art, cooking, handling, or wardening because all of those have no number in them at all. Oh, and hunting. So that's just the bare basics of how it works. But how do you use it to your advantage? Well, the first thing you're going to want to do is only have these first 5. These first 5 are the only things that should ever be set to level 1. Now, there is, of course, exceptions to all these rules, but by and large, you're going to want to only have these set to level 1. You'll have your firefighting at level 1 because fires need to be dealt with. Patient and bed rest, they're all to do with medical stuff. They should all be level 1. And basic, which is it's mostly to do with flicking switches, releasing prisoners, and opening containers. That's if you have a switch for your kill box and you want it immediately activated, it's usually good to get it done sooner rather than later. Though, in all honesty, I'm not sure this is that hugely important because I usually will manually tell someone to flick a switch. Though for releasing prisoners on time, it is quite useful. Now, the doctoring one here is very important. If someone has a skill and they are actually good at doctoring, then yes, of course, make sure they treat it as the highest possible priority. You want your sick people tended to. After that, we get into the more basics. So just for the simplest one, I've chosen Snail here. Snail is a build mine person. The reason they're called build mine, if we check their bio here, their construction is 14 and their mining is 14. They also have the potential to be cooking and medical. And if we check back under here, you'll see they are actually a doctor. They're a registered doctor and all that. They're up at level 1, so they will definitely prioritize doctoring first. But we're just going to ignore the firefight, patient, bed rest, and basic and assume everyone's got those at level 1. But after that, they will do doctoring first. If there's no one in need of medical tending, they will do construction. Once construction is finished, they'll do mining. Once both of those are done, they'll do cleaning, because that's cleaning is higher than haul. And then haul is at level 4, meaning the last thing they will potentially do is haul. And once all of those are done, then they will, sit around and be idle. They're never idle. There is always cleaning or hauling to be done, to be honest. And yeah, I've never had anyone standing around doing nothing unless they don't have haul or clean ticked. If they don't have haul and clean ticked because they can't do dumb labor, that's the only time you'll have an idle pawn. And this is just the general gist. You're going to have a pawn and you're usually going to give them 2 main skills by end game. Early game, you will have to make some exceptions. So example, we'll take, say, Sugar here, and we'll check out their bio, and you'll see they're really good at construction, they're really good at mining, and they're really good at crafting and social. So they've actually got a lot of things going for them. So if we check out here, you'll see they've got, we'll come back to warding in a second, but they've got construction, mining, smithing, tailoring, crafting. But they're going to do the crafting first, namely because at this point in the game, they're a really good crafter and they will do very high quality items, so you want them to be crafting first. If all of the crafting is done, they will do construction. If construction's done, they'll do mining. And if mining's done, they'll do cleaning. And if cleaning's done, they'll do hauling. And this is all after they've done wardening. Now, wardening I want to give a special mention to. I have a lot of people assigned to wardening, a lot more than you normally would. The reason being is wardens also feed prisoners. They feed prisoners, as well as talking to prisoners. So what can happen is if you only have 1 or 2 of your best people assigned to wardening, what happens when they get injured? What happens when they get sick? What happens when they go out in caravans? What happens when they're not around? Well, what happens is the prisoners get starved and then they will go and have mental breaks and then they will they'll be more likely to start prison breaks and they'll be more likely to just cause general mayhem. And you won't notice because, there'll be no warning that they're starving until they suddenly go crazy. So definitely have more wardens than you need. True, you will have occasionally people who are not good at social, talking to the prisoners, and that's a little bit inconvenient, but it's still a lot more convenient than having your prisoners beaten to death because they keep having mental breaks because you accidentally starved them a bunch of times. I mean, accidental war crimes are not really war crimes, are they? But before we go any further, let's cover one of the reasons we put everything at level 2 or 3 or 4, and we only use those outside of the original 5. It's to do with, say, something like, you wanted to load up this transport pod. Now, you want to load this transport pod, and if you just say have 1 person in it and they're so you select all 3 of these, you put 1 person in for a caravan or 2, and then you tell them to load up an awful amount of materials, like say, a whole bunch of say simple meals. Let's just grab a bunch of random stuff here. Here we go. And yeah, there, we'll go grab some cloth also, and we'll hit accept. Now, at the moment we start up the game, look, no one does anything. No one cares. No one's filling it up. The reason being, you don't want everyone on hauling. That would be terrible. And now there's no reason for anyone to fill that up. Or, well, they will, but it'll be very slow. So what you can do when you need things done in an emergency, you can just go over to haul and go all the way up to level 1. And now everyone who is not doing any of these emergency things will come along and start filling up your transport pods as quickly as possible. And you can actually get this done nice and quick. And then the moment the transport pods are done, you can simply go back in and turn haul back to 4. For this reason, I always leave haul at level 4. There's a downside to this, of course, and I'll cover how to get around that, but by and large, it does mean you can do fun things like, oh, we've just had an enormous attack and our kill box has been horribly damaged, and we need to repair it as soon as possible so that the next attack doesn't get us. In that case, you go over to your construction and you hold down shift and press, you hold down shift and you press the left mouse button. That increases by 1 everyone's construction skill. And that just means all of your constructors, just say they were secondary constructors, their primary was something else like mining. Well, suddenly you've upped their construction skill by 1. Now that construction skill is going to override everything else, and people who had a secondary construction now are going to treat it as their primary focus, and suddenly you're going to get a lot of repairs done very quickly as everyone jumps in on the construction projects. Now, your level 4 people, they're not going to be affected. Those people who aren't good at construction and instead are doing cooking or, specializing in other tasks, the level 4 won't affect them at all. And then when you're finished repairing everything, you just hold down the shift button again, right-click here, and you've decreased the priorities for everyone, and your secondary constructors go back to constructing. If you, suddenly need to clean up the place because you've got hit by a rather large infestation in the center of your base and fire foam poppers went off, or there's been some horrible mess and you want to clean it up before the negative side effects of all of that negative beauty comes along, crank cleaning up by 1 level. The way the system works is you kind of have everyone on the same system. Oh, sorry. Sometimes your caravans are going to end up with different numbers and you have to fix them occasionally. But you want everyone sort of, for cleaning and hauling, I like to have everyone on the same number system. That means I do have the occasional dedicated hauler and cleaner. For example, Grasshopper here, they're kind of, they're a bit weak sauce on a lot of skills. They're good at medical, but at the time I really desperately needed someone who could do cleaning. So they ended up being my designated cleaner, even though they have the potential to be good at animals and crafting. So Grasshopper here is a dedicated cleaner that I got fairly early on that does the cleaning and hauling of the early game base, but they also had animal handling in there as well so that they could tame animals. So the guts of the system is only have these ones at level 1, keep cleaning at level 3 for everyone, keep hauling at level 3 for everyone, and then never put anyone in here, any of the skills in here above level 2. There will, of course, be exceptions. For your example, at one point, I desperately needed art, so I did put people at art level 1 so that nothing else would interfere with it. I wanted them completely dedicated to it. I needed a bunch of emergency statues for reasons I can't even remember anymore. So there are reasons and times you can put things up to level 1. But just remember, you need that overhead so that when an emergency arises and you need someone to prioritize things more intensely, then the ability to just crank everyone in a skill level up 1 whole row is amazing. For example, you've planted an enormous amount of fields, boom, and it's time for them to get harvested. Suddenly you can just crank up plant cutting so that everyone who's got a secondary in planting can help out. That's the whole point. You keep everyone around 2 to 3, and that means that you can start overriding things as you need them and turn secondary people into primaries as necessary, and then revert them back with simply 2 clicks. Okay, everyone is extra prioritizing construction, and then another click and everyone's back to normal. It just allows you to quickly and efficiently switch your priority systems. Of course, there are downsides. The downsides are the hauling. Since hauling is so low for literally everyone, I had to find a way around this, and yeah, that's where your animals come in. So when it comes to animals, this space has way too many huskies, but when it comes to hauling animals, the best animal I could find is the husky and the Labrador. Well, the husky is technically the best. Husky and Labrador are almost identical in every respect. It's just the husky has a larger range of temperatures it can work in. It's more resistant to the cold, so it won't get hypothermia in colder climates, making it just, it has no negatives and it has that extra positive on top of it, which makes it technically better than the Labrador, but in warmer climes you won't notice the difference. Anyway, distracted. They can also haul, and they can haul steel chunks. So if, say, there was a mechanoid ray drop or some kind of drop pod and a bunch of steel chunks lying about the place, and I don't seem to have any available. Yeah, so if any steel chunks end up lying about the place, they can go and haul those because they're large enough to do it. And as far as I'm aware, terriers can't, so that makes them less useful. At the same time, they're also omnivores, and you can give them a little bit of a fridge so that they can occasionally chow down on some of the raiders that might happen by. And as well as that, if you put the raiders on top of wooden shelves, there's no morale debuff. So people can come in here. Let's just grab Vex over there for a second. Even though Vex is right beside these, there's absolutely no negative for being exposed to dead bodies. The reason being, once things are on shelves, there's no beauty debuff for having them around. You can see here, yep, no problems at all. We're all golden. That's just a handy way to make sure that these animals can be fed. So they're cheap. They're omnivores. They're cheap to feed of most of the animals that can haul. Well, most of the animals that can haul chunks. You want to be able to haul stone chunks and steel chunks with these things. So they're probably the cheapest animal in that in terms of feed capacity. They're omnivores, so they can eat anything pretty much. Vegetables or meat. They will quite happily eat corpses as well, which means all the raiders are a free source of food. At the same time, they also have no wildness, as in there's a wildness percentage on every critter. Here is the wildness percentage on these is 0. This is more of a multiplier though, training decay interval. So as far as I'm aware, they will never, if you tame a husky, they will never actually stop being tame. You don't have to maintain their tameness. However, if you have, say, something like an elephant or a horse, they do have a tameness percentage, which means if you go into, say, animals here, this first thing here, this is tameness. That can degrade over time, and it needs to be topped up. And the only way to top that up is by one of your people going over and maintaining it. However, all the other things like guarding, hauling, and rescue, all of those need to be trained and maintained. But since they have no wildness, it does cut down on their maintenance requirements, which means you don't have to spend as much time training animals to do hauling. Well, these particular animals to do hauling as you would elephants or horses, donkeys, all of those other ones. They all have some sort of wildness in them. Also, at the same time, they have animal filth rate. Animal filth rate means as animals walk around the map, they produce dirt. Especially when they're walking across tiles and things like that. Animals don't. More house-like animals don't. Cats, dogs, those sorts of things. So they don't produce any filth. If you have elephants or donkeys running around your base, like say that one over there, eventually at some point it's going to start dropping filth, which means they require more maintenance. So for this particular setup, using this priority system, I normally use an awful lot of huskies, namely because they're the cheapest thing to do it with, and it allows me to specialize all my pawns in doing their jobs. Then you set up something like, say, stockpiles in relevant locations. For example, over here we have our stonecutters table and we have our electric smelters, and nearby we have some stockpiles set up. So I've spawned in some metal scrap over here, and I've spawned in some stone chunks over here. Now, if we've got this configured correctly, what should happen is the people who are not busy will come along and pick these up. Preferably our dogs. Wait, did I leave everyone on haul? No, I didn't. Oh, turns out there's not much jobs to do, is there? Well, okay, there will be some dogs along, I swear, to help out with this task. I think they may be taking a little bit of a smoke at the moment. Oh, wait, here comes the dog. Here comes Imp. So Imp will pick up the stone chunk and wander off. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of tasks set up for people. But this means that all of the stone chunks and the scraps end up over here. So you'll notice stone chunks over there, they immediately get chopped up by the stonecutter's bench. Metal scrap goes over here. And then people who are available to the electric smelters will go chop those up. It's just a simple system where the dogs do the majority of the long-distance hauling. So if metal scrap lands over here, your dogs will go get it. And it's supposed to just sending your pawns out. Your pawns should be dedicated to doing what they're good at, which is working and getting better at tasks. So let's have a quick look through the skill system here for a second. This is the numbers mod. It doesn't actually modify the game in any way. It just allows you to, display information more conveniently. It's very handy for picking out things. So for example, I just want to look here at a few things like this is Bazooka Joe. They're a constructor. And if we check on them and go to their bio, you'll see they're really good at constructing. They are incredibly good at constructing. And if we check in here, constructing is literally the only thing they do. They're set to. They have clean and haul as their secondary. And this is not a coincidence. The reason they're the best constructor we have is that's the only thing they do. The better people are at something is usually a relationship to how much they do it. So when you find people like, say, Chan here, why are they set to art built if their construction's that high? Never mind. Oh, yes, I desperately need some artistic people, so I repurpose them. By and large, though, if you want someone to get very good at something, you usually need to have it as their primary focus, and they need to be doing a lot of it. However, that also leads to some weird things, like, say, these miners here. This person might have mine and build down as mine as their primary and build as their secondary, but their building is going to be terrible because they're going to spend 99% of their time mining. If you have mining drills down, they're probably going to be spare mining drills all the time, which means their other stats are going to suffer. However, when it comes to things like crafting, that's good. Having very high-level crafters is great, and having that being their primary focus is wonderful. But I suppose what I'm trying to get across here is Normally, pawns are usually only good for just about one thing, maybe two tops. I mean, you can get away with two of them. The only thing that's an exception is medical. Medical people will they'll develop their medical skill just from doing operations. One or two operations will usually jump them a whole level. So they'll get their basic medical up until about level 10 to 12, depending on how good your hospital is. Then you switch them over into surgeries, and once they can do bionic replacements and stuff like that, they'll hop back up really quick. But that's stuff they do intermittently. The things they do every day, like say cooking, will mean they'll pretty much be a specialist cooker and almost nothing else. So Barracuda here has been alive a very long time. Their cooking is level 17. They're not bad at the animals. And yeah, you see the problem here. They're going to spend most of their time doing cooking all day unless there's no cooking available, and then switch on to animals. This is just an inherent built-in problem with the system. What that means is you need specialists for pretty much everything to get the maximum out of a pawn. The more they specialize, the more powerful and useful they are to you, assuming they're able to utilize that all the time. I said we'd start at the end and work our way back, so let's have a look at a very, very starting colony. We're going to just set these two manual priorities over here just so that we can see the numbers. Actually, wait, it's easier if we just leave these in green arrows for the moment. Now, this is going to be a very common theme you see at the very start. For example, we've got Sleepy Bureaucrat here, and you notice they have an awful lot of green ticks against them. The reason for that is they're just generally all-round just awesome sauce. They're good at shooting, melee, mining, plants, animals, medical, social, intellectual, and as such, the game has decided that they should have ticks in all of those things. Remember, you're going to notice something here. They're the only person planting, mining, growing, cooking, handling. So they're specializing in all those tasks along with wardening and a bunch of other things. This is bad. They're never going to be able to do all of those things. So you're going to have to make some suboptimal choices at the start so that you can actually spread out the workload. First thing to look at is construction. Everyone sucks at it. They all are terrible. This one has just rolled really bad on construction, and construction is incredibly important at the start, so usually you're going to crank that up. Let's actually go open the number system here. This is all of their stats. All of them across. For some reason, they all ended up with good medical. Just the luck of the draw, I suppose. So intellectual, there's only one of them that's going to be doing research. Wait, no. Let me try and configure this better. Construction, that's the most important thing at the start because you need to get up your skills. So everyone is pretty much terrible at it. So we're going to let everyone do construction. We're going to take Sleepy Bureaucrat here. And the goal is they should be specialized in the things only they can do. For example, they're our only good cook at level 5, which means cooking should be their number one priority because cooking is a very high priority. So we're going to have to slowly figure out who needs to be doing what. So we'll just go in here. There. First 5 are all set to 1s. It turns out they're all good doctors, so they're all getting the doctor treatment. But they're going to be set to our primary cook. No one else will be doing cooking at all. And then we got to find out what's the secondary most important thing, which is construction. I want everyone doing a lot of construction right now at the start, so I'll probably crank all of those up to 2. Usually you'd only have 1 or 2 good constructors, but in this instance we have literally none. As we said, Sleepy Bureaucrat is our number 1 at pretty much everything. So anyone who has a skill in something, for example, they're our best miner, but we would rather they wouldn't be doing mining and instead be focusing on other tasks, and instead we will assign Larry to be our miner because they do at least have a basic skill in it, which could be useful for them. Then over here we've got, crafting and art. Wait, we'll leave that till the end. What's more important here is hunting. Now, Sleepy can be good at hunting, but we're trying not to spread Sleepy thin. They're so good at everything that we don't want them being assigned to all of those. So instead, we'll make the others capable of hunting. Wardening, we're going to assign everyone who can do wardening to wardening. Well, like I said, it's very important, though there's no need for prisoners just yet. While Sleepy is our best animal handler, we don't want them doing handling. The reason being, we want them doing other things first. We'll just set everyone there. Let me have a quick think some more. You're going to want to play around with this a bit at the start, and it may not be perfectly optimal. I'm just trying to get across the general gist of you are occasionally going to end up with pawns who are amazingly good at everything, and their purpose is to fill in the blanks. You may not be able to put them on the things they're best at, but what you do is you take people who have only a limited number of choices and you assign them to the things that they can become good at. And then you use your really good people to fill in all the little gaps that can't be filled by the others. That's the main thing to take away. And then as the game progresses, you're going to end up in a situation. You know what? Let me show you. This here is Digtastic. Digtastic has been with the colony an enormous amount of time. They're an undergrounder, teetotaler, which is a bit of a negative, and a masochist. So they are, and look at these skills. They've got burning passions for medical and planting. They've got passions for mining, crafting, intellectual. They have so many good things going for them. Yet they're not our best pawn at anything in particular. The reason being is they fill in for things. If I need mining done all of a sudden, I can switch them over to mining. If I need someone to help with planting, or I need someone to help out with research, or maybe I need some extra crafting at particular times, all throughout their career, they have done many different things. And due to the way skill degradation occurs, you can check here their progress to the next level is slowly going down. The higher they get up, the faster this skill degradation kicks in. So normally they might have ended up doing an awful lot of crafting for a while, but now they've lost a bunch of that skill because instead I've assigned them now to help with the intellectual. The same with Dog's Body. Look at this pawn. They're amazing. Burning passion for medical, animals, cooking, a whole bunch of things. Yet crafting is their highest skill, namely because they ended up doing a lot of that because that's what was necessary at the time. What I'm trying to get across is, let's go find a good example of a complete opposite pawn. This is Val. They're a quick sleeper and a psychopath. They can't mine, plant, and they can't haul. They have spectacular crafting skill. The reason being that's pretty much the only thing they're good at. And the quick sleeper trait means they get up, they need less sleep, which means they can spend more time at the crafting bench. Also, any other good things that would help would be quick learner, stuff like that. But because of their limited range of skills and abilities, and of course I did hire them later in the game, they end up just being very, very dedicated and very good at one task. So bear that in mind when you're doing out your work skills. Early on, your early hires will probably, you'll be looking for people who've got flexibility. But as it goes on, getting specialists is not the worst thing in the world, and it really opens up an awful lot more hiring potential. One last thing is I'm going to recommend a mod. I don't normally do this for vanilla tutorials, but there is mods you can get out there. This is Complex Jobs, and I know it's made the screen an awful lot longer, but let's just start over here on these 4. This is the haul job, but it's been split into 4 parts. Now, instead of just having hauling as the option, you've also got deliver, cremate, and load. What this means is you can basically go, okay, it's a loading job for, say, loading up caravans or transport pods. You can crank up loading. That means if people are loading up your transport pod, say, over here, they're now going to prioritize doing that. They won't try prioritizing just hauling and delivering and cremating in general. They'll only prioritize loading, which is very handy, especially if you're doing a lot of trading. But probably the most powerful one is when it comes to doctoring. For example, here you'll see we've got, oh, that one shouldn't be there. We've got doctoring and surgeon. The two medical has been split into 2 sections. Doctoring just means general medical tending, as in tending to wounds or injuries. This is surgeon, though, which means bionic operations, that kind of actual operations, surgeries, they will only be done by people who have ticks in this. So this means you can have, say, Kuro here, who's got a skill of 10, and I don't want them doing any operations because they have a chance to fail still. I want to wait until they're level 11. So they can still do medical tending to people if they're injured, but they won't do any surgery. This split up just means that later on as your colony gets bigger and you're doing a lot more operations, you can just make sure that only your dedicated surgeons do it, and the regular doctors will still be able to go around and tend to people if they injure themselves. There's also a bunch of other things that have been introduced, like rearming turrets, refueling things. All of these things have been split up a bit more. You've got, instead of just mining, you have mining and drilling. Currently, as it stands, if these 2 are combined, mining will always take priority, as if you say you dig out a mountainside, and then drilling will come second using one of the mining drills. But you can change that around if you want. It's just, it gives you more granular control of what you can do. Anyway, I have waffled on way too long about the joys of priorities. The main thing to remember is usually keep haul around level 4, clean around level 3, and everything else around 2 to 3. And then what you do is to supplement all your hauling supplies, get yourself a bunch of animals. Huskies are probably the best that I've ever seen, but it will depend on what type of map you're on. Everything is dependent. There are better systems than this depending on what map you're going to be on. If you're on an ice sheet, you might not be able to afford all these Huskies. You know what I mean? Anyway, I hope this has been mildly informative for you, and good luck.